Two more things I want to discuss. First one is kind of like alcohol and genetics, because I don't know. I feel like you don't touch that much on that in your book, but I'm just curious personally. And then I want to finish with the behavioral question. But the genetic side of alcohol, I think it's so often justifiable to drink sometimes because we see somebody else drinking and they look great and they don't have any health complications. But then somebody else might be drinking and they do have a bunch of health complications. How genetic is our ability to metabolize alcohol? Is our ability to tolerate alcohol and maybe have it not impact us as negatively as somebody else?
Yeah, so I talk a little bit about genetics more in the sense of being passed down, people's
Right.
alcohol use and alcohol use behaviors. What's really interesting about the genetic components of alcohol is that there's so many different ways and so many different genes that can actually affect why we might use alcohol, why alcohol might be more effective on certain people. Everything from the way that our liver metabolizes alcohol, which is one of the big ones around how, if we are quick metabolizers of alcohol or slow metabolizers of alcohol, if we clear it more easily, some people feel better when they drink alcohol, whereas others get really negative side effects even after a handful of drinks or even after one drink, right? So the person who only has one drink and feels not great, that person is going to be less likely to consume a lot of alcohol because it doesn't make them feel good, right? Whereas on the other hand, if you are someone who clears alcohol quite good in the beginning, at least, you might be more likely to continue using it because your body is feeling pretty good when you're using it, right? That's not to say that if you feel good doing it, that you should continue doing it, right? Because what typically happens is over time, again, the alcohol is affecting all these different areas of the body. So it's interesting because I think we always look at others or we compare ourselves to others and we think like, well, how come they can drink like that and I can't? And but we never know what's going on in someone else's side of the fence, right? That person might really be struggling with that situation too. But you're right in that, genetics are going to affect across the board. So I'll just use a few examples. One to say, if I'm someone who is less likely to absorb B12 and folate, there's a common genetic mutation called MTHFR. We call it the mother effer gene, but it basically has to do with how our body detoxes, how we absorb things like B12 and folate. And B12 and folate are stored in the liver. So the more we drink alcohol, the more that we flush out these important nutrients. And these are two nutrients that are actually really important for the brain, for things like mood and reducing anxiety symptoms. And so someone who is more likely to deplete out these nutrients is going to have more nutrient deficit as the result of alcohol, right? So that's just one example or a couple of examples of how genetics can play a role. And so it's part of why some people feel better. Some people benefit more from a sleep perspective. Some people, have one drink and flush and don't have another, right? And so it's really interesting, the genetic piece. But as you know, genetics could be we could talk about genetics probably for hours in that realm.
Yeah.
But something that can be really interesting for each person to dive into with themselves.
Yeah, you mentioned the MTHFR gene. Recently had genetic testing done, so I've been looking all through my results a lot recently. Do you know the name of the gene that is responsible for uh, alcohol metabolization and or clearing off the top of your head?
Alcohol dehydrogenase,
Okay.
ADH. ADH and ALDH are the two main enzymes that help with alcohol clearance in the liver. Yeah, so
Cool.
those you can look at to see if you are, how quickly you're clearing alcohol. Those will be kind of an indication if there's maybe disruption in that pathway, you may be someone who tolerates alcohol worse or better than someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.